Hi everyone, in this video we are going to tackle on the masking and value layout for the character and perhaps the background. Let's continue. So at this point we already have the line work of the character. What we can do to make our masking easier is to close up all the gaps of the character. So I will go over the line work one more time, which probably will take a couple of minutes to do. So if your line work is too rough, you might want to make a new pass to go over it again, because simply having very clean and close line work will actually help you in more reliable masking, and so you will save a lot of time later on doing the cleanup. Places that you are not very sure about probably do not need to worry so much. Just try to find a nice simple shape and close the gap. So as you can see, like right now I'm trying to look at the overall outline of the character. So any place that doesn't have an enclosed line, I will go ahead and close it again. Also be aware of the thickness of your line. If you are going for a thicker line, you have the tendency of making a thicker line. Chances are you might need to clean up even more later, because if you have a thicker outline, that means some edges would be less precise when painting over. So imagine our line work of the leg is this thick. Right, when you fill in the line work, it's going to take the shape of the outside and then flip it inward. This thick line will become the sort of like the excess of the silhouette. So try to keep your line work thin, but not too thin to the point that not everything is close, because definitely there will be a lot of human error involved in this part. For the tail, I'm not too worried about it because the tail is on another layer. So I'm just zooming. Let's turn off the tail first for now, so that I can be more clear on the outline of the character. Everything seems okay to me, other than the hair, because the hair is very messy right now. That's why if when in doubt, right, just erase the part that you think is messy, then go over with a simpler line. This way we can, as long as you have the silhouette, which is part of making the composition look good, we can always go in later and subtract out the parts that you don't need. Notice that let's say the hair and breast is like connected to each other. I'm not too worried about what's inside right now, because I'm taking the entire mask of the character instead of part by part. So let's test it out. You take a magic wand and click it to the outside of the line work, and if it's selecting the places and it's not going into the area of where you want the mask to be, then that's fine. And notice that I have some garbage mat here, and that's depending on how you erased it. In this situation, I did a bad job on the erasing. I'm using a soft eraser, so if you are conscious of how you're erasing, make sure to use a 100% opacity brush so that you will not meet this kind of problem. Okay, so we have right now the outer area of the entire character. So let's Control Shift I invert in Photoshop to flip the selection, and then let's Control alternate backspace to fill in the blank. Okay, you can see that we do actually have some area that is not closed. In this case, you can manually fill in, or you can go in and check the line work again. So for me, I think that line work is really tedious, so the masking is really tedious, so I am just going in, try my best to fill in again areas that needs to be filled in. So let's try again. So just now there's a little bit of garbage mat over here, so we need to remove that area. For tolerance of the brush, normally 23 the default 20 should be okay. Yeah, but in this case I'm using 50, and for line work it probably doesn't matter how much of the tolerance there is, but just try not to make it to the value of 1. Areas on the inside that needs to have space, also remember to lasso it. We actually have quite a clean masking right now. So yeah, even though we spend about 45 minutes on the line work, it's all worth it because it gives you a clean mask. So the better your line work is, the cleaner the mask will be, and there's definitely no no bad consequences for spending too much time on line work. Even though I did say the final product will not have line work. Yeah, the good thing is that you can be so precise in the first stage of doing line work. You might not need to ever adjust the masking again. But for me, I would, for my workflow, I normally would change things in the middle of the drawing. So I'm not too particular about that. So I actually did reference my hand for this particular hand pose. If you guys need any hand reference, don't be afraid to take photo of your own hand or look up online. Yeah, and so there we have it. We have right now the character on her own layer, and at this point what you can do is adding maybe some background element. Is not very important to edit right now because your character already fulfill a composition. Any background with a nice flow or compositional line to aid the piece would actually help. Yeah, and since this is a pinup, right, for me a background can be anything to really, as long as it fits the character, it really can be anything, right? As you see from my older from my past work, I tend to use like a circular shape, a moon or something to frame our character. She could be, you know, floating in the sky. Some very soft cloud. You don't want, at this point, you don't want to use very hard edges, because if you do that, sometimes it might kill the attention from your character, right? We can always go in to decide how sharp the edges of the background should be, but in this case, no, it's not important. And everything you do, like I said again, it's going to be used. It's going to just give you a rough idea of how the finishing would look like. For the tail is too thin. So I will just use a hard brush, 100% opacity. By the way, I am using a comma and full stop button to switch between my brush. Let me show you guys setting that I have. So this is my own brush set, and I only use 100% hard brush, brushes with pressure on, slightly soft brush, and some edge control brushes, and then the rest would be things for finer touches or impressionistic brushes, textures, and other things. So the most important thing is still the round brushes and the hard brushes. So you do not have to worry so much about having very different brushes or custom brushes. It's not important. So for the tail, I will use slightly darker tone because our tail is on the foreground. So, and this is a fairly simple shade. It's just a hard shade on the tail and a string, a very thin line of the tail, right? So you don't have to really lasso. And at this point, you can also figure out like how you want the tail to curve. Whatever I was drawing on the line work can be changed. Like you really don't need to follow it too hard. Look at the length of my character tail. It's very long. So we can definitely use it for compositional sake. And again, tail, I would definitely like go back in and change something about the tail later. I believe as it is right now, it really look okay. At this stage, I will render my character in a studio lighting. So what is a studio lighting? A studio lighting would be very diffuse lighting, like this kind of lighting on the character with not much lighting influencing her. This kind of lighting, like you don't know where the light comes from. Or it could be that you can set just one light source to light up the character and everything will be diffuse lighting, like this kind. You'll be rendering skin. If there's skin, we can only see the form of the skin, but we don't really know where the light comes from. In this case, the diffuse light comes from the top, and there's also a slight backlighting. This kind of lighting can all be added later on. You can just focus on coloring and values of the character for now. Okay, let's go on. Okay, at this point, we can either do flats for the character by cutting out every single part of the area that has different color. Like let's say the stocking's black, the skin will be on another layer, the hair will be on another layer, the wing will be on another layer. We can definitely do that. For now, we can actually do it later, and then what we should do right now is to plan on where the light source or the form will look like. I will definitely duplicate one of this. one of the masks so that I can always refer back later on if I need. So let's say the stocking and the hand is feel free to cut more. Feel free to cut more of the parts that you want to cut out first, because you can always erase later on. So cut more than cutting lesser would be easier to edit. Notice that I am cutting more and I'm cutting over the hand. Is also because, right, this layer, this current layer is below the hand. So that's why I can afford to cut more, and it does not matter. Later on, if we need to, we can also fill in this. If we want to change the hand pose, we can also fill in that. So it's also important to understand what is going on behind. Like, let's say this hand is covering the chest area. We should know how everything is connected behind this hand. And if you do not know how, it's sometimes you want to change it, right? And you did not do construction, and that's when the problem comes in, because the form and everything might be wrong in the first place, and you continue to finish the drawing, and at the end of the day you wanted to change the hand. You want to put the hand here instead, and then this whole part is all wrong and you probably need to redo again. So we want to avoid that. That's why doing construction in the beginning is very, very important. Very, very important. And this character is fairly simple. There's not much crazy detail on her. So even for the wing, I can separate into two parts, by the way. But for now, it's fine. Let's not talk about like this kind of small detail. We can use clipping mask later to do the detail. So for me, I just want to separate skin, clothes, wings, hair, and maybe horns. Horns can also be in the layer of the clothes. In this case, we are just, if anything, we can merge down later on. So I'm also not very worried about. So if you have done the hair properly, this is where it might come in handy, because if you tend to draw like very soft hair, then you might messed up the shape of the hair. But if you actually draw the hair and properly simplify the hair and make it into one shape that is distinguishable, this is when your lasso would be, you know where to lasso, you know where to cut. You know, okay, there's a forehead here, there's a side bangs, there's a curly tail over here, and this all will save you a lot of time, because you already know what's happening right here. Versus later on, you might need to figure out the hair again, which is not impossible to do. It's just if you have figured out in the first place, you don't have to do all that later. So again, this is, at this point, everything is still very loose, and we can see the separation very clearly, right? The hair, the skin, they're all in their own layer. And right now I am going to put their own local color in. So what is local color? So Control Y is actually to, if by default setting on Photoshop, you will have custom, and this was set to CMYK. So when you press Control Y, it just shows you another color but in CMYK. But if you can do like, if you can set this to dot gain 20%, when you press Control Y, it shows you values. So you don't have to make a extra adjustment layer on top of your artwork to check value. You can instead use Control Y to check value. So right now, the local color of our skin is definitely the lightest here. So I'm gonna make the skin way lighter. So like I said again, studio lighting. So even for the background, you want to, since it's a studio lighting, you don't want the background to have anything for now. So set it to like slightly gray tone. A good studio lighting kind of color would be nice. And then for parts that needs fixing, use a hard brush, go in and fill back in, or use an hard eraser to erase the part that needs cleanup. So the more precise at this stage, the easier it is for you later on. Right, let's say let's turn off the line work. Right now you can see very clean shape. We can even distinguish what's happening on this character just because we have already separated everything. So you realize I did not mask for the skin. That's also because the skin is on the base mask, and I'm just fixing things on top. But there will be a problem that you will meet later on. Like, let's say I want to fix the leg and I started shifting the leg. Look, the skin is exposed right now. The skin is exposed. So what we can do is that if you want to extract the skin at this stage, what you can do is control click all the layers, control shift click all the layers that you have worked on. This way you can control shift I, which is invert, select only the skin layer and then duplicate it upward. Right now the skin is separated. The skin is, and yeah, just nice. We are on the, even though we are on the value stage, like we know by default skin is just slightly toned this way. And at this point, the art looks a little bit like maybe a rough cell shaded character, but still semi-realistic, sort of like Korean comic art. And if you are at this stage right now, if everyone you guys are trying to learn my art style, this is exactly what we want. So hair, we can make it pink as well. So as you are doing value, you with this control Y color proofing method, you can start adding the colors in already at this point, because you can just simply control Y to check. One thing to only take note at this point is that you do not want your colors to be too saturated. So try to maintain your saturation beneath 50%. Don't go over 60%. That is actually not needed. For in a realistic setting, characters tend not to have so much value and so much color, so much saturation on them. We can always, and also by reserving all the values, all the saturation to 50% and below, we can use the next 50% here to add on to our focal point later, or we can add it to subsurface scattering later, or overexposed lighting. That will make our character pop even more, and I will show you guys the process when it comes. Okay, now let's group everything up. So this is our full masking of this character. Control Y, check values. Skin is relatively light. At the end of the day, I don't want to confuse the background light color with my character. So I want to separate them as much as possible. So at this point, I can either do forms, or I can either just start to render skin. For the sake of tutorial, we should definitely do a value comp first, meaning to settle the light and shadow of the character, and then later on we will paint in the values of the skin or the colors of the skin. So right now, Control Y, we are going to do the whole thing in grayscale for now. So I tend to use hard light. Can also use multiply, but let's try hard light first. So do not look at colors at this point, because it's going to be confusing, because the color will not be accurate at this point. So right now, let's decide on the lighting. Maybe the lighting comes from the top. I normally use a soft brush to glaze through the entire character. This way we know, okay, the light comes from the top. Yeah, I'm not going for precision at this point as well. I'm just looking for an overall shape. And the cool thing about this is that if you turn off the line work, you can slowly get to see our character starting to become more defined. Yeah, the shape is coming out nicely. I'm going to lower the line work, the opacity of the line work, so that we can just focus on making the form look good. So since it's studio lighting, many things will be flat, will look flatter than usual. At this point, you will probably be thinking, why am I painting genuine color on top, and how I will merge them down later? At this point, you do not have to worry about that. There are artists, or there are processors that you leave this on top, and then later on you go down in color, and you do not need to touch this. As long as this is accurate, you will still get a very good result without having to merge them down. So if there's a need to merge them down, I will also show you the process later. You can just duplicate it a lot of time like this, alternate click, 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 and then just click mask and merge them down if need be. Or you can just merge the entire thing down when it's close to completion and then edit from there as well. So there's really no one method to do this. I think the hardest part right now is to make the face look good, because the line work will be removed later on. Normally what I would do is, if I think the face is good enough, I will just cut out the face and merge it down later on. I will still go back and fix the part that is when the mask is not very nice. I make sure to pick the correct color, because right now we have the hard light layer on top. So if you are picking color at this point, you might pick the wrong color. And at this point, do not worry about material rendering. At this point, you just have to think of the character as a cask, a styrofoam cask. Try to use a bigger brush first, and slowly transition into smaller brushes later. This way, you do not have to spend so much time on doing all the details. Yeah, a lot of artists, beginners, have the tendency to draw out every detail, but in fact, in most art, there's a lot of loose edges, there's a lot of glazing and gradient going on. Therefore, the big brushes would be sometimes more used than actually the small brushes. Small brushes would be for completing the pieces, but at this point, we are still finding out the value comp for this. If I close the line work at this point, do I understand the form? If I do not understand the form, then we have to definitely spend more time on this step. But yes, in terms of the separation, is definitely coming out very nicely, and this is a very, very fast method. For the wing, I probably will do it later because I still have to cut out the wings. So we probably can focus a little bit more on skin, because we will definitely have a separate lesson for hair itself, because hair is very complicated. There's a lot of detail in this case. There's a lot of separate strand. There's a lot of curves. We will go in and talk about how we can design it later on. So right now for the hair, it's rough blocking, just to show, okay, light comes from the top, there's shadow below. 10 here blocks the light coming from the top left, and horns here blocks the light coming from the top left. Yeah, and be subtle about this. You don't have to render the value so harshly. So right now, I do not think that we understand the form of the hip. So I will focus a little bit on the hip. Probably see a little bit of the shoulder blade anatomy here. Brush, more brush. At this point, we haven't used a brush that is less than 100, simply because we are not doing details. We are doing the overall lighting for the character. Only when parts like this, where ambient occlusion comes in, that's when I will use a smaller brush to make it more precise. So if we check the color, it looks very dirty right now, which is why I do not expect you guys to check the color at this point. It's not going to work. Okay, turn off the line work and see how it goes. Does it look like we have something to work on? Yes, it does. Other than the boob area, we still don't know which one is the front and the back boob. Yes, now we do know. Now we do have a visual cue of the front and the back of the chest. Okay, what is missing? What is unclear right now is probably the wings. The wings left. So let's add in the... Oh, I think I forgot to draw another the wing, the horn of the wing. That's why it looks so flat right now. Yeah, this is where we can also add in. And at this point, because we are already in the grayscale, we do not need to draw the line work again. The line work is going to disappear very soon. So we can sort of like imagine, okay, let me cut this first. So at this point, you have to imagine, or you have to construct how the back wing look like, so that you know where the horn would come out from. Is it here or is it here? Which one looks better also? Or is it maybe it's a bit close? The wing should be a bit can be a bit close to make the composition look better as well. Yeah, and if this is better, then lighten the back wing. As we know, back is a back wing, so when things goes behind, the value will become lighter. It will be diffused into the same value as the fog. Now everything is clear. And at this point, we haven't do details, and it's not important right now. So one thing that everyone is probably excited on is definitely the skin rendering. And at this point, we can save and we can make a new duplicate of the shadow. And what we do is I have explained earlier, is to bring down the mask, hold on your alternate and just keep dragging. I am sorry for my computer performance. And we shall go to the second lesson where I will tackle on coloring the skin.